Hello and welcome. I'm Helen Atkinson, Managing Editor at Supply Chain Brain. I'm excited to be moderating this webinar today, sponsored by OpenText, the title for which is Streamlining the Path to SAP S/4HANA. Organizations are increasingly migrating to SAP S/4HANA to achieve faster, simpler business processes. But the potential for mistakes can make migration costly and complex, underscoring the need for an experienced partner to help navigate the journey. During this webinar today, we're going to be hearing from an expert at OpenText about best practices and lessons learned from S/4HANA migration, excuse me, with a special focus on B2B integration. First, we're going to have a presentation from Patrick Nemeth from OpenText. Then we'll have a one-on-one discussion where I get to dig into the subject a bit more with Patrick. After that, we'll open it up for a Q&A session with questions from you, the audience. Please submit questions at any time using the tab at the bottom of your screen. We will not be using people's titles or company names, so go ahead and ask anything you like. If you don't see your question come up during the webinar, please be assured we will reach out to you offline. Right, let's get to our speaker. Patrick Nemeth is Product Marketing Manager for Business Network at OpenText. Solution areas that Patrick focuses on include ERP modernization, digitization and automation of supply chain processes, B2B/EDI integration, data visibility and analytics, and active risk monitoring. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you, Helen.
Well, without further ado, we're going to get into Patrick's presentation.
All right, let's get started. So what's looming over the horizon there other than a giant iceberg? It's the 2027 deadline for SAP ECC support, ERP Central Component, and it's approaching quickly. Hopefully by now, you're in the process of considering your approach to transition to S/4HANA and thinking about how you'll allocate your resources to meet your timeline goal. That said, there's a lot more to the process lurking beneath the surface, and we've seen some companies not realize the vast scope of these projects. Many of our customers underestimate the massive undertaking to transition to S/4HANA. The players recognize the future of their company is on the line, and some SAP customers are spending hundreds of millions on these projects. On the extreme end, we've actually seen a customer's transition projected to take almost 10 years and $1 billion to complete. It's a massive IT project, and the focus is on how to manage the timeline, resource allocation, and if and when to bring in a systems integrator. Just as an aside, we are not an SI. We specialize in assisting with B2B transformation, and our role deals with business integrations, data migrations, focusing on integrating with external trading partners and customers, and ensuring your external data requirements are actually captured and translated. Oop, too fast there. So while we are mostly focused on integrations, OpenText is a close SAP partner, and our main takeaway that we want to get across within today's context is just to assist you in carrying some of the weight of such a massive project. Here we can see the deadline for SAP ECC support, and ideally completing transitioning your S/4HANA is at the end of calendar year 2027. According to the study done by the CTO of Rising last year, this gives some insight into how the SIs are projecting their SAP customers' resource demand will continue to rise over the next few years, showing the increase starting this year and ramping up to that 2027 deadline. We've actually recently begun seeing some of our customers hesitating to move forward and delaying their project timelines due to all the economic uncertainty globally. That said, resource demand is still growing, and many companies will end up going past it, which will lead them to them paying that higher maintenance fee, and support officially ending entirely at the end of 2030. This is good to keep in mind if you're leaning towards delaying the start of your project, as the risk of increasing resource demand from the SIs will result in it being more difficult to meet your staffing needs, in addition, of course, to the added cost of the extended maintenance fee. If you're in that group that is late in the game, hesitating on making the investment to transition, OpenText can help accelerate your timeline. So in this next section, we'll look into some of the key goals and requirements for your transition to S/4HANA. What requirements are important for our customers for their decision to migrate to S/4HANA? As reported in SAP Insider, which is SAP's annual benchmark report, the top key requirement for companies considering migrating is minimal disruption. We see that echoed with our customers, particularly in integrating with their external trading partners and suppliers. They want to handle migration in a way that their customers don't even know they're being migrated when it comes to their cash flows and data exchanges between those partners. Of course, there's other concerns that are important as well, maintaining compliance with local and global regulations, seamlessly integrating between their legacy core ERP and other line of business applications and systems, and choosing a proven and reliable partner, of course. Still, the key point is minimal disruption. Time is of the essence, and OpenText can help minimize those disruptions, as the project will impact and can change your integration requirements. So while the main requirement from our customers has been to minimize disruption during the migration, we still need to consider how different line of business applications are affected by the migration and how we mitigate risk and how the different approaches impact the other requirements. So B2B integration is a key challenge for S/4HANA migrations. We've identified sort of 3 paths to consider when dealing with your B2B integrations during your migration. The first would be modernizing your SAP capabilities with new solution design and architecture. So you would be deploying a completely new solution to modernize your B2B integrations based on analyzing your existing and future requirements. This parallels a customer transitioning their legacy ERP to S/4HANA with a greenfield or a completely new implementation approach. It's a lot of work up front, but in the end, you end up with a B2B integration processes that align with the best practices and capabilities of S/4HANA from the beginning of your new path. Second path would be optimizing your existing operations. So you optimize your existing B2B integrations by analyzing and addressing any broken connections, auditing your compliance, consolidating your B2B integration maps, etc. The makeup of reusing old architecture and changing over to S/4HANA really depends on how much of the existing processes are reusable and how far away they are from S/4HANA best practices. This is sort of paralleling the hybrid approach to a complete S/4HANA transition. So companies that are looking at a hybrid approach will be looking at item-based mappings that they're using with trading partners and asking how much can they reuse and does it make sense to move to APIs to support real-time data flows? Does it add business value to switch to APIs versus continuing to use iDocs, etc. And then last, of course, we want to safeguard and mitigate risk while handling the necessary B2B integration tasks, such as redeployment of iDocs and efficiently and on time to support the ERP migration. The trade-off of this, of dragging your feet, is if you do the bare minimum with your current system, it's less risky in the short term, but this isn't an ideal long-term solution. We see most of our customers falling into category 1 and 2, and many organizations are looking at entirely new deployments or some kind of hybrid development. So why the change over recent years? Like we said earlier, some companies are dragging their feet as they get closer to that support being cut off. And they're realizing they need to make a decision soon. They recognize there are limited resources out there to help, and they're feeling that pressure. There's risk of new regulations being implemented as well. As things change in our world over the next few years, it potentially leaves them vulnerable to compliance violations. So as the 2027 migration deadline approaches, organizations are, of course, looking to best manage the costs and risks of the migration. As we've already discussed, minimizing business disruptions, managing the project timeline, your quality of data, project delays, etc. It needs to all come together seamlessly. Rising costs can come from any of these areas during migration, and it's key to have a good strategy to stick to your timeline and avoid delays however possible, and not letting S/4HANA impact operations when it comes to your external partners. So what does that look like? From our point of view, it starts with redeploying and testing your existing integrations with the old ERP system and understanding the requirements for supply chain data exchange. This is how we help the companies map out their data. Second is setting up a parallel test platform. Part of managing risk is having perfect data capture requirements. This offers an additional layer of insurance to avoid disruption, as offering that parallel test platform using real live data from the existing B2B integrations to test the system is a powerful tool to avoid surprises. Third is the time management of your integration experts. We see some companies forget about integration and not realize it really is a strategic topic. They underestimate the amount of work that comes with integrating, and as more and more companies are ramping up their migrations, the resources to assist will become scarcer, and integration becomes the bottleneck, creating delays in other parts of the business. This is why it's imperative to bring us into the conversation early on so we can understand what your requirements are and we can manage what expert roles are available to you. Finally, the overarching program management. As long as we know the requirements early on, we will help determine the amount of work there is to be done and help manage your resourcing. Again, some of these projects are taking up to 10 years to complete, so it's best to get moving. So we just mentioned some of these projects could take up to 10 years. How and why? Well, let's take a look at some of the challenges. So looking back, there's some key things to keep in mind when considering B2B integration with an ERP project. One, you want to have a solid plan of managing redeployment to efficiently deal with changes in file layouts, such as switching from iDocs to S/4HANA APIs, optimizing your existing integrations, your shared maps with your trading partners, and identifying reoccurring issues such as EDI chargebacks. Second, deploying the right technology to support not just your business practices today, but looking for opportunities to improve going forward and fixing the reoccurring issues we've identified, while also looking for new capabilities in automation and improving your data quality. Third, we want to mitigate risk by accurately testing the integrations, especially if you have one-off partner requirements, simulating the new system behavior against real-life business data, and managing your integration resourcing in alignment with the timelines to avoid your bottlenecks. So how does OpenText support you through an ERP migration? Going back to our earlier slide, where we identified the 3 groups of migration approaches, we start looking at existing integration requirements with a deep data discovery and analysis for those greenfield and hybrid, the 1 and 2 organizations. We have more information on this data discovery tool in a white paper, which a link will be provided to you after the presentation. In the next stage, we begin creating a B2B optimization plan for the greenfield and hybrid organizations by studying what you're doing today and figuring out how to perform those processes better. In the third stage, we're evaluating if you want to be doing something new, like improving your data quality, adding automation, or changing into different messaging types for your transactions. And in the last stage, We're managing the transition of any existing integrations. If there are any new capabilities being added, and we're mitigating that risk by deploying that parallel testing framework. So, of course, in such a project, we want to have the most optimized strategy. And like we said, that starts with the data discovery phase. That build didn't look like it worked correctly. Let's go through it. Huh. We wanted to start over here. So let's go back a little bit. I don't know why it did that on the build. So we really want to start with the data discovery tool, and that spits out the current connections and maps. We really dive in to get the deeper insight onto what your current capacity is so we can evaluate that versus your business needs. Once we've analyzed that data, our expert ecosystem advisory service consultants begin advising you on how to optimize your B2B processes. And finally, aligning them with your overall business strategy. We have that expertise because we've been in this space for over 30 years. During that time frame, we have assisted over 35,000 organizations, and those customers are connected to 1.1 million trading partners. So here's an example of how we used our data discovery tool and expertise to successfully help a multinational CPG customer. Our data discovery was used as a precursor to the company's SAP and B2B platform consolidation to identify current ERP and trading partner data usage and help guide their future ERP requirements and data quality improvements. The company derived several insights from the engagement, including use of multiple IDOC versions that were not required, and they needed to be consolidated as part of their SAP S/4HANA project. OpenText also performed a B2B assessment and ROI analysis to help clarify the implementation scope and their cost requirements. As you can see from the outcomes here, we were able to help with some huge results. The ERP data requirements and IDOC release consolidation resulted in shaving 12 plus months off the program delays and a cost savings of $2 million. The integration map standardization accelerated their B2B integration migration by 6 months and additional cost savings of $750,000. Even more cost savings in reduction of their EDI chargebacks to the tune of $100,000 annually. And finally, they were able to streamline their onboarding of their new trading partners by 20 to 35%. Not only that, this company is now ahead of the curve and enjoying the benefits of S/4HANA innovation, and their company is now future-proofed. So with that, Helen, do you want to?
Thank you. Hi.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Patrick. Wow. What really struck me about what you were saying was 10 years and $1 billion. That's pretty
Yeah.
high stakes for some people. So let's get into some of these issues in a bit more detail. Patrick, it seems to me that this is one of those things that no one notices if it goes well, but it has enormous impact if it goes wrong. So
Definitely.
how well do you think companies today are taking integration into consideration when they're mulling their ERP migrations?
That's a good question. So it's interesting because it's actually shifting really like the past year or two. Historically, most companies were hesitant on upgrading everything, and they really wanted to do it piecemeal and with the least amount of investment as possible. But as we saw in that graph from the SAP Insider, over the past year or two, more and more companies are looking to upgrade everything at once, which is a good sign because, of course, this is a huge project as we outlined, and delaying it is no longer an option for many companies. So yeah, we see that most companies are actually considering integration and that's a big change over the past couple of years. Before, I mean, really like 2021, 2020, 2019, they were just, it's way out there. It's years down the road. We're not worrying about it. But now that some of the companies are seeing how big the projects are with their competitors, they're wanting to change over everything.
Right. So it strikes me it's almost a little bit like the Y2K thing.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. Well,
everybody initially just put their head under the covers and and then they realized they really had to do something about it.
yeah, I would say like, it's almost like you're looking over your shoulder. What are they doing? Are they doing it? Oh, okay. Well, they're doing it. We should probably be doing it too. So let's all do it. So that's what we're getting at, and that's going to lead into that resource scarcity if everyone's trying to do it at the same time.
Right. And do you think that awareness is growing because companies are finding that their customers are going, hey, why aren't you communicating with us this way? Or
So yeah, that is a good point actually. There is definitely requirements from the trading partners to upgrade. Many of them are upgrading their own systems as well. So if you're, a large supply chain company and your smaller guys are more agile and switching over to S/4HANA, you're no longer able to communicate with them. So you either need to, as we mentioned, do a hybrid approach and piecemeal upgrade certain things here and there, or you take a step back and say, okay, let's just do a complete holistic upgrade ourselves, and then we'll be in a better position.
right. So I mean, it sounds like it's really, I mean, I suppose this goes without saying, but it's a competitive advantage, and doing it sooner
Absolutely.
rather than later is a
Yep.
good idea. So a lot of companies are using systems integrators to help with these ERP migrations. So how do systems integrators play into the whole scenario?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we are not a systems integrator, and we do a lot of work with them though. So we don't have a pre predetermined like relationship with them. So the SIs typically will work on finding a vendor that meets the requirements for the project. So the company will contract out the SI, and then they'll reach out to us first to determine if we're able to do what the customer needs, which of course we are. The SIs, they work with implementation and testing and setting up materials, inventory, more hands-on stuff, the financial systems, the HR department, warehousing, and from an OpenText perspective, those are all things that we're not involved with. So where we work alongside them is the SI is responsible for telling us if this trading partner is sending a purchase order to our mutual client with SAP, and then this is the defined path. This needs to connect this way and follow this format. When do we send the data? What's the content? What fields are present or missing? Does it qualify as a drop ship versus a warehouse order, etc.? All of those are triggers to a business process within the ERP, and the SI is defining those rules for us, which we need to comply with in order to implement the system. So we make sure the data can drive those processes.
That's great. So you're doing a lot of work with systems integrators. Are there any particular things that companies should be looking for in a systems integrator? Do you have any tips
Um,
on that?
so I
Should they
no,
have been around for a long time? Or, no, I'm
yeah,
just curious. Yeah.
it's an interesting position they have in the industry because they they will handle a lot of the work in such a project, but there's certain things that they can't do because they haven't dived into the technical aspects that a company like OpenText is able to. So, like I said, they do, to a point, and it's almost like a handoff. Um, and I mean, we work with like Deloitte and Accenture, it's two of the big ones. So, but there's so many SIs out there, so many smaller ones, and really, I think they are all able to do the job that they do. Um, but when it comes to, the nitty gritty, like real technical aspects of such, transitioning to a different ERP system, they understand that that's not their expertise. And so they reach out to us to bring us in to handle that piece. And
Right.
none of them will really even try. So they know they're their place and our place, and we have a nice symbiotic relationship.
Right, great. So it sounds like those duties are fairly well defined and people know what they're doing. That's
Yeah.
great. So let's broaden this out a little bit. So, I mean, how do you see the opportunity for organizations when they're moving to S/4HANA, when it comes to integration? What is there an opportunity to rethink fundamental business processes, or is that too risky? I mean, is it an opportunity for a kind of redo or a rethink?
Absolutely. So as we've mentioned a few times now, initially, um, the taking on such a project is seen as a burden to move over all these systems. And the opportunity is really, like you said, the ability to step back and take a look at all your processes. You know, you'll be switching over to technology that has a lot more growth potential. So whereas, you're on a product that's at the end of its life cycle, we know it's no longer going to be supported after 2030, and switching over to, a new technology, a new product, it gives you the chance to streamline the total end-to-end process and resolve some of those common challenges that you're probably just living with because, it works.
Mm.
And there's, a few guys in the basement that are clicking away at a typewriter and making it happen. But, and, we are seeing that there are some people that are retiring, like again, the support is going away. Um, it's a huge transition time. And so of course there is that opportunity to say, okay, A, B, and C work, but D, E, and F aren't. But we just kept D, E, and F going because it's such a huge project. But if you're taking on you're investing the money and the time to move on to the new technology, there's a huge opportunity to get rid of all that dead weight and really streamline your processes into the next generation.
Right, so it's a bit like moving house or something. You throw out all the things you
Exactly.
haven't worn for 5 years, right?
All that stuff that's in your attic, like we mentioned on the customer success story. So that in particular customer,
Hmm.
they had many you know documents that they didn't need, and that just slows down your data transfer. It's just inefficient. So getting rid of all that stuff and really streamlining your processes, yeah, it's a huge opportunity.
That's great. That's nice to hear something positive rather than rather than just scary and expensive and long term. So let's talk about timelines for S/4HANA. How would you advise people who are facing this deadline, how to think about the 2027 deadline?
So, I mean, I know some of these answers are kind of similar, but we're really driving the point home, right? I mean, it needs to be a paradigm shift. We know these are huge, expensive projects, and it can be daunting. So but that said, the window of opportunity to really capitalize on the resources available is shrinking. So not only do these projects take years and millions of dollars of investment to complete, they also can take years to begin. So the opportunity to start now and leapfrog your competition when it comes to efficiency and innovation, and like I said, future-proof your company with SAP's newest technologies is huge. And as you mentioned, Helen, you can view it as a competitive advantage because there's a lot of companies not on the call today that are dragging their feet, right? So you guys are all here today wanting to take this first step into, going into the next generation. So the sooner you get that migration done, the sooner you can realize some of the cost savings and benefits and reinvest that time and that money into other parts of your business that would otherwise be tied up in attempting to modernize your old ERP or piecemeal or re-engineer it to keep you want to keep your trading partners happy and make sure they're moving forward as well, because they're probably asking the same thing of you.
Right. Well, that seems to me to be very critical that, no company is an island these days, and you're going to be working with partners who are increasingly sophisticated and have migrated over to the system.
Mhm.
And the pain points are going to increase. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Patrick. I really think that it's great to hear that although there's a deadline sort of several years away, we really need to be thinking about this now. And you've made that very clear. So now we're going to move into our Q&A session and with questions from the audience. Once again, please submit your questions using the tab at the bottom of your screen. We will not be using people's titles or company names, so you should feel free to ask anything you like. If you don't see your question answered during the webinar, please be assured the OpenText team will reach out to you offline. So let's see what kind of questions we're getting in here. Oh, here's an interesting one. Is there a difference between the licensed version and SaaS, Software as a Service version of S/4HANA?
Yeah, good. That's a good one. So there are organizations using S/4HANA on-prem that want to use their existing licenses, or they can purchase new ones to implement in their own data centers. And let's see. Essentially, many of those features are locked out of the on-prem license structure, and SAP really wants their customers to invest in S/4HANA Cloud, either via the public edition or S/4HANA Cloud private edition, which would be with the Grow with SAP or Rise with SAP contracts. So there are a lot of features with AI, and there's a ESG and carbon accounting software that they lock out for the licensed customers, and they really want you to they really want the customers to migrate to the cloud version.
Right. So it sounds like it's best to go with the software as a service cloud version.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Cool. Great.
Even though there, I mean, there are customers that do have their, previous license version and they want to keep it, but it's actually there's some controversy around it because not everyone has or not everyone's in an industry where a cloud service works, but that's the way everything's going, and SAP really wants to push their innovation with their cloud services.
Right. Right. Well, that's understandable. I think so many things have moved into the cloud now. It seems to
Hmm.
make sense that this sort of cutting edge technology would be best accessed that way.
Right.
Super. Here's another question. Does the data analysis only work if we haven't started yet?
So uh, with our data discovery tool, you can do your data analysis at any point in the project, but it is better to do it from the beginning, so we can map out all your connections and your documents exchanged, and we start off knowing where your data is at, the quality of your data. You don't really want to start getting into the middle of the project and implement your testing network on data that you don't know is good. So yeah, you can, but it can cause further delays and unnecessary costs. We really recommend doing that data discovery early on in the project, not waiting on it.
Right, right. Thank you. And actually, on a related point, I was curious. You talked about having a sort of parallel process where you're looking at your data and your documents. Is that like having a digital twin, or is that something different?
Yeah, so basically it would run alongside your current ERP system, and
Hmm.
we're using your real-time data. So real data, no fake customers or anything like that. Um so yeah, it would be.
Great. Oh, God, thank you for clarifying. So,
Mhm.
and how long does the data analysis take typically?
So with our proprietary data discovery tool, it usually only takes about 1 to 2 weeks to do that analysis. So best case, we like to get at least 6 months of data from the customer, but we can probably make do with 3. but the more the better. Of course, the more data to analyze, the longer it's going to take to start the project. But that sweet spot for us is really about 6 months of data. We feed it into our data interrogator, and then we aggregate it. So here's your fields, your qualifiers, and we consider that your blueprint for the ERP.
Great,
So,
thank you.
yeah,
Um,
it depends on how many transaction types but yeah, that's why we like to do it at the beginning of the project, because it really doesn't take that long. So, if you can get us that data early on, then we can get moving really quickly.
Great, excellent, thank you. Could you talk, here's a good question. Could you talk about what part of S/4HANA will be more challenging than the previous version of SAP?
Well, I would say if it really depends on what approach you're taking. So if you are doing a complete new ground up implementation, the challenge is probably really just the money, the money investment. We know it's going to be a huge project. It also depends on the size of your company as well. So, it's not impossible, especially if you have a good partner like us and a good SI to work with. There's nothing that can't be done, but it is a process, and I mean, learning, knowing exactly, basically, for lack of a better term, the language of your trading partners and what data they're using. You want to make sure that you're on the same page as them. So, yeah, can you actually just repeat that
So,
question one more
no, it
time?
was just no, and
I lost my
I
train of
I
thought.
like what you're saying, but I think it's more. So, are there aspects of this new system that are more challenging, more difficult to use? Or is it all a massive improvement? Do you think there are things to
Yeah,
watch out?
no, other than, I would say, like we mentioned, legacy customers wanting to keep their older licensed version of
Hmm.
SAP, um, that may be a pain point for some companies in certain industries where they're not ready to move to a cloud solution. Or for a smaller mid-market company, they may not have the funds allocated to make the investment. And I can see, we've seen there's grumblings with some companies that they don't really want to do this, but they have to because their trading partners are or their competitors are. So that could be, but there's no real huge changes and challenges in operating the new system compared to the old one.
To know. Thank you.
Mhm.
Um, so you said it was a somewhat technical question. Is integration with S/4HANA Cloud done via SAP APIs, or are IDOC or other formats available for exchange and import export of information?
So yeah, we would be mainly transitioning over to APIs. Now, like I said, in a hybrid approach, if you are keeping some of your older business processes alive and moving those forward, there are some adapters that can, adapt from iDocs to APIs, but really SAP wants you to use the new APIs for S/4HANA.
Great. That's really good to know. And let's talk a little bit again. I'm getting quite a few questions about the system integrators. Um, So do you find that most people are using SAP integration suite as their SI solution, or do you see them using other systems integrators?
That's a good question. I may need to come back and touch on that one, after the fact for
Hmm.
whoever answer or asked that one, because I think, yeah, I can't say for certain. Being on the marketing side, I'm not involved in some of those deals that are going on with sales. So, but obviously, of course, there are some companies that are using it. It is their own in-house, integration team. But
Yeah.
there's still a lot of people using third-party SIs.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure because again, they're big partners of ours. So I'm not sure why some companies aren't using them, and I don't have the numbers as far as how many are. Um, some are, some aren't. And we see a mixture. So
Right.
But I would actually like to look into that one a little bit further and reach back out to that person who asked that one, because that's a
Right.
really good question, actually.
Great. And I mean, it seems I'm getting quite a few questions here about this, and it feels like it's a fairly complicated process because you've got a systems integrator and then you, and then
Hmm.
working with SAP. Um, would you be willing to just sort of map out that how that works just a little bit more?
Sure. So by the time that we get involved with, a qualified lead, they're needing a solutions consultant. They've already signed an agreement, um, an ERP agreement, and probably established a contractual agreement with the SI.
Right.
So there's times where we actually would be working with the SI more than the customer. And once we come on board, we want to get the actual integrations working correctly. So we shine with the people and the processes, whereas the SIs work with implementation and testing and, like I said, setting up the materials, financial systems, HR, etc.
Right.
Um,
That's interesting. So
yeah.
you're coming in later on after
Yes,
all this groundwork has been laid.
right.
That's
So while, so that's kind of why we're here today, because a lot of our customers don't bring us in early on in the conversation, and we've seen our more success when they do. So, that's kind of a change that we're hoping to make from today, because they'll do, the kind of the old ways. They find their SI, they're like, okay, well, I think we need to switch to S/4HANA. Let's reach out to either SAP integrator or an SI and see what are our options. And then, months down the road or a year down the road, we get the call, and then it's like, eh, we could have helped you earlier. So, so
right.
that's kind of what we're hoping to do, and maybe that can, because especially, this year's three-quarters over, um, so we're down to 3 more years, and of course we want to keep our partners happy. So, there's no reason to really go to that 2027 deadline and go beyond it and pay that extra maintenance fee just to keep your old system alive that you're going to have to scrap anyway at some point.
Right. Sure. Sure.
So we may as well
Fantastic.
start, as soon as we can.
Start as soon as you can. It reminds me of that story about, I think it was Louis the 14th who asked his gardener to plant some exotic trees. And the gardener said, well, these take 50 years to grow to maturity. And he said, well, you better do that. You better plant them right away. There's no time to waste if it takes that long.
Exactly, yeah.
Um, so this is all great stuff. I think we're running out of time, and we have time for just one last question. Patrick, please tell us, how would you advise someone who is wondering what's the best way to develop a clear strategy for moving on from SAP ECC, and how do I make sure that timeline is realistic?
Okay. Well, that's a good, because it kind of touches on everything we've mentioned. And so, like I said, that deadline is set by SAP and 2027, and it's just going to get more expensive after that if you go into that 3-year period up to 2030. So your system's still going to function, but after 2030, SAP is not supporting ECC anymore. This is a huge risk for businesses that are delaying transitioning to S/4HANA, because you have to do something. So the potential resource constraints on the SI side are a major concern. Um, it's almost like this: if everyone is waiting to the last minute, some people are going to get left behind, and you don't want to be in that camp. So think of it this way: if think of it like you need to travel for the holidays, right? And if you wait to the last minute and you need to arrive, for Christmas Day tomorrow, and you leave your flight to midnight, what's going to happen? All the flights are booked, flights are getting canceled, flights are getting delayed, and you're at the mercy of your airline partners. So the difference is in that scenario, you have it's only a day or a week, you're going to miss your holiday, right?
Right.
But in this scenario, you could delay your project up to, multiple years, which we only have 3 left. And if everybody is vying for the same, resources, someone's going to get left behind. We don't want to see that happen. We can help alleviate some of those process pain points. So don't wait to 2026 to get started.
Okay, that's sound advice. That's fantastic. And we're going to wrap it up now. Thank you so much to Patrick Nemeth from OpenText. And then a special thanks to you, the audience, for participating. We always love to see you here. I think we've learned a lot about migrating to SAP S/4HANA to achieve faster and simpler business processes. A few opportunities in there too, sounds like. We had a lot of questions today, and we'll be answering the ones we didn't get to with you offline. Those of you who registered are also going to get an email later with links to the white papers you see on your screen now, as well as a link to view the webinar on demand, which you can share with anyone. There will also be contact information for OpenText, of course. And for those of you watching after the live show, you can easily find these detailed and informative white papers with a quick Google search on the title and OpenText. So thank you so much for your participation. Stay safe, stay happy, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you.